I'll step back a number of years. I actually developed an interest in working for educational organizations because of the impact that higher ed had on my life, the way in which it opened up doors and afforded me a number of opportunities that really allowed me to not just experience economic mobility in terms of earning potential and the career that I have that my parents didn't have access to, but it also created an opportunity for me to think about how I wanted to go back and invest in my community and think about how do I take what has become an incredible privilege for me and think about creating pathways for others to have the same level of access so they could experience success the way that I had been able to do so as a result of my education, specifically in higher ed. There are a number of issues that exist in our educational system that result in barriers so that a lot of people of color and in some specific disciplines, women don't experience the same level of access and subsequently success in education. So I became really interested in kind of studying like what are the barriers to having equitable access and outcomes in education. So for a number of years, I spent specifically working in higher education as a diversity professional, eventually becoming a chief diversity officer. And in that capacity, I worked with decision makers and leaders to help them understand how you go from creating mission statements and value statements around equity, diversity, and inclusion, and how you transform that into everyday practices and policies that allow you to really experience the benefits of having institutions where everyone can thrive equally. So there was just a gap between vision and practice. And so I started working with nonprofits to apply some of the same principles that I used when I basically partnered and coached leaders in higher ed to develop the capacity to implement equitable practices. Our educational system has struggled with really laws and rules that were grounded in racism, right? So you can't examine a system and then not eventually uncover that, whoa, this wasn't just me that couldn't access higher ed at the same levels that my white counterparts could. There were rules that were already in operation that limited people from being able to access that, right? So how do we take them from thinking about programs that are really a reaction to what we didn't do correctly to begin with and get them to not just do that, but to examine what are the rules that we need to go back and look at? How do we look at our admissions? How do we look at how we distribute resources? Because everybody doesn't come to these systems with the same level of resources to prepare us then for the same levels of success. And so is the education that's afforded to both populations, white and non-white, equitable? No. One of the reasons that we haven't achieved, and probably one of the most impactful reasons why we haven't achieved equity is because at some point we failed to first and foremost see someone as a complete human being, right? So because we believe that that is the foundation for equity, what we've tried to do is raise our girls to really really challenge themselves to think about how do you engage with folks in ways that you are honoring their full humanity, right? And then from that, you are able to develop an appreciation for the ways in which we differ in our identities, and you can do that in a way that difference doesn't feel threatening, but rather that you are celebrating the differences, and you can see how it's also important to see our similarities, right? But it's not either or, it's all of that. My lens is really to make sure that we have examined whether or not the system is going to help us to achieve the goals of equity and inclusion, and also to have significant conversation around the value of achieving equity and inclusion. Well, if you believe that we should all have the access to become whatever we want to become, then you should care about how you create systems for everyone to have that opportunity. How do you really achieve the change if you don't examine how the system was intended to operate anyways, right?